Nick, I'm getting messages where somebody is some of them are asking me the meeting password, yeah?
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I know, but there have been messages coming in, so some who want to log in are having that.
Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Kareem to 200 ladies and gentlemen tuned in from all over the world. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology, UAE branch. The IMarEST, as it's also known, was established in 1889 in London and is the first international specialized body for marine engineers, scientists, and technologists. We have 23,000 members in 128 countries, and it is the largest marine organization of its kind, supported by global branches, including the UAE. My name is Nikhil Lidnani, and I'm the Honorary Secretary of the Institute's UAE branch based in Dubai. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today. The mission of the IMarEST is to be the international organization of choice for all concerned with marine resources and activities by providing professional leadership, upholding standards, and developing and sharing knowledge based upon integrity, quality, and fairness. Now, speaking of fairness, today we shall discuss the importance of a critical stakeholder in the sustainability of shipping, the seafarer. Along with you all participating in our webinar, the multifaceted panelists will brainstorm current challenges and possible solutions to unite the maritime industry, to ensure seafarers are not used as scapegoats in the event of a maritime accident. And speaking of accidents, the 20,000 TEU container vessel Ever Given ran aground on the 23rd of March. We will be foolhardy to ignore the elephant in the room. Yet today, we will try to steer clear of the sandy banks, pardon the pun, by not speculating on the reasons the 400-meter container vessel blocked the canal. But instead, we look at the bigger picture, such as the risks involved in navigating through restricted waters like the Suez Canal, and the state of mind of those responsible for safe navigation and their liabilities. As the Honorary Secretary since 2012 of perhaps the most active IMarEST branch in the world, I have hosted 88 seminars, mostly with a technical theme, which, to be honest, is my area of expertise and my comfort zone. Today's discussion, however, is close to my heart. To explain this, let me take you back to 1969, when I boarded my first ship as the baby of the chief officer. Thereafter, I sailed with my father, and this photo was taken during an uneventful Suez Canal transit in 1982. Ever since then, I was fascinated with the sea, and all I wanted to do was become a ship's engineer, which I did for 10 years before losing my sea legs in Dubai. And I'm not the only one passionate about seafarers. One of our panelists has recently published a white paper relevant to today's discussions, and in fact, the reason we are in this webinar today. But more about that later. Now, speaking of panelists, please allow me to introduce you to our fantastic lineup of speakers for this webinar. I'll start with Vikas Vij, the Managing Director of Anglo-Eastern Ship Management. Vikas started his career with Varun Shipping and then joined Anglo-Eastern in January 1987. He predominantly sailed on dry cargo ships, bulkers, and a few container vessels. He joined Anglo-Eastern Hong Kong office in 1999 as superintendent and has been with them to date. Vikas, thanks for joining us from Hong Kong. We invite you to share your thoughts on topics for today. Over to you, Chief.
Good day to everyone. Whichever part of the world you are, please take it as such. Since the topic today is the seafarers, I would start by saying that we, the seafarers, the lifeline of produce from one end of the world to the other, are compatriots. Most of us at least, have been out at sea at some time or the other. These are challenging times for them. Last year, it started last year with the COVID, and it continues actually. Challenging times for them in every sense of the word, whether you call it extended tour of duties because of uncertain reliefs. We've had problems. We have till date. We have problems getting visas, airline tickets. You can name it. So the problem for the seafarer is not only restricted to the extended time of duty, but also the challenges where he cannot go out in port too. Either there's restriction within the ports, or it is just not safe for him to go out. They have done so much for us, and we should not forget them in any way. Mistakes do happen, problems do occur. They all have a reasoning, and we should not jump to any conclusions without a proper hearing to our colleagues who are on board vessels. Not only our seafarers, I would also extend it to their families back home who are really challenged. They don't know when their loved ones will come back, how long it would take, and of course, they should come back safely. At the same time, I would thank the ship owners too, actually, because in these challenging times, there are limited ports where sign-offs are possible. And sometimes this involves a lot of deviation from the vessel's normal trading routes. Keeping the expenses aside, that's another chapter. But just deviating the vessel, whether in loaded or ballast passage, to make reliefs possible. We in Anglo-Eastern have been lucky enough with our the owners who have been very cooperative, and our figures of delayed relief are really down to less than 3%, or which is quite good in these times, I would say. Having said that, and saying that mistakes do happen, the blame game that we think that people are subjected, our seafarers are subjected to, I think, in my opinion, everybody goes to office with the intent of doing a good job, whether it is ashore or at sea. So our seafarers too do exactly the same thing. Nobody has an intent of malice or any grudge. He is there just to do his job, earn his money, and go back and do the job to best of his ability. So let us give them a fair hearing when some things go wrong. Things do go wrong, they go wrong ashore too, but the seafarer should get a proper hearing to whatever the circumstance may be, whether it's an injury or anything, actually, any incident on board. Having said that, coming back to something about ship, preparedness, basically, since we are talking about restricted areas where the ships are plying arrival and departure port or narrow passages, I think one of the important things that we have to, which our seafarers do and do it diligently, is the drills that we perform on board. A various number of drills that we have, there are so many drills that it's difficult to enumerate them. And that's why we give maybe a 3-month or a 6-month time frame, because these are normally done as Saturday routines, what we call. And every Saturday it's a different thing. And they do try to make it as realistic as possible. They do their best to take down notes and discuss on board where they could have improved. So they are doing their bit. It's not that they don't do their bit. They do their bit to the best of their abilities, as we said. And we all of us ashore, all of us, whichever way we can, we should do all that we can to support this fraternity of ours who are doing an excellent job in very trying times today. I think with that, I would ask Nikhil that I think I've just opened this space, and I would invite, Nikhil can invite the next speaker. And we will, of course, come back again for any questions that you may have in mind that you can direct to any of us. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you for that reality check, Chief. Our second speaker is Christopher Greenwood. Chris Greenwood is the Regional Director for Business Development for ABS, responsible for the Middle East and Africa, based in Dubai. Chris joined ABS in 2008 as a graduate trainee, starting his career in ABS's London Engineering Plan Approval Office before moving to Houston, Texas for initial training. Chris was subsequently posted to South Korea, where he spent 6 years, after which he transferred to Japan, where he spent a further 3 years. Chris then returned home to the UK as the principal surveyor in charge of ABS's Aberdeen port, responsible for ABS's North Sea operations. After a short spell in ABS's corporate office in Houston, Texas, running a strategic project, Chris was assigned to his current role in February 2020. Chris has a bachelor's in marine technology from the University of Plymouth, a master's in project and program management specializing in oil and gas from the University of Liverpool, and postgraduate certificates in strategic operations management and artificial intelligence and machine learning from the Universities of Copenhagen and Oxford, respectively. Chris is married with twin 4-year-old sons and is passionate about anything to do with the sea. Chris, since you are passionate about anything to do with the sea, presumably that includes seafarers, can you bring us up to speed on what CLASS is doing to help seafarers focus on their core roles?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nikhil. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to represent ABS during this discussion, which I'm sure will be very interesting. So I think ABS and CLASS in general, I think we really do have a significant role to play with regards to seafarers' health, fatigue, stress, and working conditions on board. Fundamentally, this obviously starts at a statutory level with the enforcement of things like ISM and MLC conventions. So we talk about things like the design of sleeping compartments, for example, minimum headroom, floor area, berth dimensions, provision of natural light, soundproofing of cabins, temperature, noise, vibration, minimum rest hours, which is obviously incredibly important. That's covered under the MLC 2006. And maybe more relevantly to this discussion, things like complaint procedures. We, as an organization, though, have tried to take this a step further than just doing the minimum requirement of what the convention says. And, through mechanisms like dedicated crew habitability notations for ship design, we're now focusing on things like ergonomics of work and living spaces on board, taking into consideration things like placement of machinery and equipment to limit trip hazards, limiting or placing equipment and machinery to limit opportunities for repetitive strain injury. So things like frequently bending down to operate valves, as well as environmental conditions such as light, sound, temperature, and whole body vibration. Vic has correctly mentioned that the additional disembarkation limits that have been placed on seafarers during this pandemic have become increasingly more stringent. So it's really important that we ensure that ships are designed and operated to make as a comfortable working environment for crews as possible, so that they're happy to spend time on board ultimately. Moving beyond these fundamentals, ABS is now looking increasingly at what we term digital ergonomics. Some people know it as human factors, but what we're looking at specifically is the risk associated with technology and digital tools. As we as an industry increase our reliance on technology to add convenience to the way that we operate, it becomes easier to view this new technology essentially as the hero in our new normal, and unfortunately lose focus on the crews and the people that it needs to serve. So the way that we look at it is we're looking at crews through 20th century eyes and approaching their problems with 20th century attitudes, but at the same time saddling them with the burdens of responsibilities of 21st century technologies. And these things don't necessarily marry up with one another. So, expecting seafarers to absorb a digital mindset without the proper support and the right tools and training puts them essentially in an impossible position and risks the safety of everybody on board. You will see, as it relates to things like human factors, the OCIMF have recently released requirements that will be incorporated to their inspection regimes, specifically for SIRE, OVID, and TMSA inspections. So, in that same vein, those who are on the call who class their vessels with ABS, they'll probably be familiar with the tools that we've developed as an organization to facilitate an increased crew focus on their core roles. We really do appreciate, and we've definitely seen in the past 2 decades, the significant increase in admin burden that's been put on crews, especially with things like inspections, check sheets, paperwork, and so on. And that frequently reduces their focus and attention on their core roles, and causes safety risk to themselves and ultimately to the vessels. So I think as an organization, ABS sees our position really as facilitating a class experience that is more automated, less intrusive, and more of a risk-based approach. So for us, really, digital technology is really the answer to that, whether it's a streamlined remote survey experience where crews can submit photos or documentation rather than having to sit on our shoulder for half a day, or things like digital tools for reliability analytics and charter party compliance, that we can naturally use the data that's naturally developed from the vessel, from a CMMS or PMS system, to inform our class decision making. And again, the focus of this is really to allow crews to focus on their core roles and ultimately be more safe.
Super, Chris. Thanks. It's obvious that ABS is capitalizing on contemporary tools, leading towards its age-old mantra of safety of life at sea. So that's a positive development. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Right. Our third speaker is Octavio Arturo Range Palm. Octavio has been for 25 years in the marine sector. He's a merchant marine officer and lawyer with a degree in nautical science from Portugal, where he was sailing for several years. In 1996 in Panama, he started training as a maritime safety inspector in the flag registry. He was appointed by IMarEST as Admiralty Court Marshal in the Supreme Court and served for 17 years assisting the Judge C. Malcolm. In 2010, he received a law degree in Panama. In 2014, he was back in the Panama Maritime Authority, appointed as chief of the training department, technical officer in Manila branch, technical officer in Dubai branch, and head of the regional office in Dubai for seafarers and Segumar, which is ship safety. Also appointed as marine casualty investigator, flag inspector, ISO lead auditor, MLC auditor, Panama IMO team advisor. Octavio, thank you for representing the largest flag administration and for your participation in this webinar.
Thank you, Nigel. We as a flag, I'm very happy to be here. Following your experience as a child of a officer, merchant marine officer, and those photos was very, very beautiful. I would like to introduce the point that in the case of the Ever Given, we have also 2 points which give us be more closer in this topic, which is first of all, the Panama was the vessel was a Panama flag, and the second one, the incident occurred in the Suez Canal. As you know, Panama have also the Panama Canal. At least we have this experience. We have a country with more than 100 years operating the canal, starting in 2000, when Panama received the full control of the Panama Canal before it was an American, as you know. Then we have a lot of experience, pilots, and then I would like also to introduce this for the discussion that the Panama flag pilots took the control of the vessel during the transit, as you know, which is different of the case in Suez Canal. Regarding the general view of the incidents occurred not only in the Suez Canal, but in any place, of course, the human factor is one of the more important aspects to be reviewed. As per our experience, the last 22 hours before the incident are very crucial, very important to understand what happened. Regarding the port operations, what happened in the last navigation previous for the port of departure to the arrival, the weather during this navigation, reports about repairs or any failure occurred during the travel, the trip, reports, health of the crew, if something happened with the food, intoxication, any problem with the drugs or alcohol on board. That is very important to know those information. Regarding the crew performance, we need to see the minimum safe manning. As you know, the minimum safe manning is the certificate issued by the flag, who contain the minimum crew necessary to keep the safety of the navigation. We have to see also though if this minimum safe manning was issued, taking in account the factors surrounding the type of vessel, type of ship. For example, we have in the case of Panama flag, we have some specific different types of ships that we have to introduce in the system in order to prepare the minimum safe manning. I'm talking about cargo vessel, passengers vessels, tugboats, supply boats. If it's the case, for example, mobile offshore drilling units, or even the floating production storage, every of these type of different vessels have a different minimum safe manning. We have to take in account also to introducing the matrix aspects or items like a gross tonnage, engine power in kilowatts, navigation, if it's worldwide or if it's less than 600 miles, type of operation, what is the operation of the vessel, and any other factor who affect the performance of the seafarer on board, specifically related with the rest, the necessary time that the seafarer needs to rest before he go to the watch, which is watching in the bridge or in the engine room. Of course, we have some specific situation where those kind of manning or certificate of manning could be reduced. For example, if somebody die on board, okay, if somebody have a mental issue on board, or have the situation that some close familiar die back in the country, then we have a kind of letter we call in the Panama flag dispensation letter. This dispensation letter should be issued following the requirements and regulations. Of course, the vessel should fulfill a form, and this form should be sent to us. In this case, we have offices. Panama flag have offices around the world. In this case, we are here in Dubai, but also we have offices in Tokyo. We have offices in Piraeus, Greece. We have in London. We have in USA, Miami. Then we can say that we are working 24/7. That means if the vessel have any kind of emergency regarding somebody need urgently to go out, we can issue this letter of dispensation letter. And every 6 months, all the dispensation letters should be addressed to the IMO. The IMO take care about how many dispensation letters we issue, why the reason for we issue those kind of the last point I would like to introduce also is the SEA. SEA is the Seafarer Employment Agreement, which is, I think, was the situation who create more detentions during the pandemic. We received a lot of claims from the owners stating that no possible to disembark seafarers in the ports where the vessel was calling, specifically because the restrictions opened by the airports or terminals and lockdowns and a lot of situations. But we, as a flag, as the Panama flag, we create a very good, close communication in order to solve the situation, because the vessel cannot stop. You know, all the people say what happened with the maritime sector in the pandemic. The maritime sector in the pandemic never stopped. The vessels continue to sail because the cargo was necessary to reach the ports, especially the food, especially the medicines. You know, a lot of things that the people was needing in this time was necessary that the ships and vessels all around the world cannot stop the sailing. That's because we introduced one regulation. We introduced one authorization letter who permit the ship owner to extend the contract of the seafarer during the time of the pandemic. That means, as you know, every 11 months, okay, the seafarer have a right to go 1 month to home. I mean, the month number 12 should be the vacation, or he can go out. I mean, should be disembarked for sure. And the idea is that Panama flag give opportunity to those crew members and manning companies to extend those seafarer employment agreements only to permit the seafarer to continue on board the vessel, of course, receiving the salaries and receiving all the guarantees, including the repatriation and disembarkation of the crew in the possible port or next port, if it's possible. Depending on the situation, we extend 1 month or even a little bit more, depending on the situation, of course. Sometimes we was in communication with the port state controls, especially in Australia. That was the more difficult situation we received, because a lot of vessels was detained, not from our flag, but for many flags regarding this extension. That means also the application of the MLC. During the conversation we had, I would like to introduce also how the flag have been held, the seafarer, during these last years. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Octavio, for sharing your thoughts. Our next speaker is Captain Mohammad Dalali. Captain Mohammad Dalali is the Senior Vice President, Ship Management at ADNOC Logistics and Services since 2018. In his current role at ADNOC LNS, he oversees the operations of ADNOC LNS's shipping fleet, including LNG and LPG carriers, oil tankers, chemical, sulfur, dry bulk carriers, and containers. Captain Alali has over 20 years of successful experience in oil and gas and shipping. He started his career as a tech cadet with National Gas Shipping Company Limited, NGSCO, a wholly owned subsidiary of ADNOC in 1996, and rose to become the first UAE national master on an LNG carrier in 2008. While there, he also spearheaded a number of joint energy efficiency and optimization projects between Abu Dhabi National Tanker Company, NATCO, and NGSCO, achieving Energy Management Standard ISO 50001 and Asset Management Standard 55001. Captain Alali and his team are the recipients of several local and international maritime awards, such as ADNOC HSE, Dubai Sustainability, Maritime Standard, and Sea Trade Awards. Captain Alali holds an Executive Master degree in Business Administration from Zaire University and a Bachelor's degree in Maritime Business and Management from John Moores University in Liverpool, UK. Welcome onto the panel, Captain Mohammed.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity for actually giving me a chance to speak in this event. You are touching on one of the most important subjects, and it's very close to my heart, to be honest. Seafarers are actually the lifeblood of the whole world economy, and not many people may recognize this until we were hit by the COVID-19. And while all the world were actually locking down, the seafarers were actually keeping the economy alive worldwide. In ADNOC, we spared no efforts to support our seafarers. We realized they are our front line. They are the one who actually deliver the service to our clients. And they are the most important element in the whole supply chain. We recognized their role, and we tried our best to ensure that they are well supported, well appreciated for all their sacrifice throughout. But and still, the pandemic continues, unfortunately. But definitely, it is much lesser challenge than what we actually faced during last year. We were quite well positioned actually to take these decisions because we are a ship owner operator, and even the charterer is within the group itself. So we were able to make these decisions and to deviate vessels wherever it needs to be in order to carry out crew changes. We provided all necessary initiatives to ensure their welfare. We kept very close communication with our seafarers. This was actually one of the most important actions throughout the whole 2020, and we continue to do this. We were quite lucky with the technology. I mean, like we have this today, the virtual seminars, the same thing we started having with our seafarers because of lack of ability of our representative to go on board vessels. Virtual seminars and virtual meetings with the vessels were a key to actually keep them aware of what is happening, or to keep them aware that they are still well looked after, and we are doing whatever we can to support them. We were also blessed with the leadership of UAE, who took quite important initiatives to allow for the seafarers. Actually, we were one of the first countries in the whole Asia to open up in terms of crew change, and we became one of the major hubs for the crew change after that, to ensure that all the owners are having an opportunity to change their crew. Maybe we suffered in our coastal fleet because of other restrictions involved. In fact, there was major travel restrictions from March till August. And this is quite important to understand what ADNOC did. We, because of this 4 months created a huge gap in our crew change. The number of seafarers on leave were actually not enough to cover the number of seafarers that are on board the vessels because of the rotation and the leave ratio. So we had to go through massive recruitment. We almost recruited 400 seafarers in 2 months just to manage and cover this gap of the overdue seafarers who have to go home and be with their family. I think many can realize seafarer, the important role, but unfortunately, at sometimes they are always the easy target when things go wrong. When we have incidents, when we have issues, they are the first one to blame. And we can see clearly from the latest incident in the Suez Canal, immediately all the fingers pointed to the seafarers on board the vessel and whether they had done the due diligence for going through the canal at such weather and whether, that they had done their due diligence in terms of maintenance, etc. It's always natural to blame the seafarers, but we need to understand they are the one who actually make the company work. They are the front line. So we need to work together with them as a team and understand whenever something goes wrong. And this is why we encourage in EDNOC to have no blame culture, but also a just culture where people are held very well accountable, yet they are not held, blamed for anything goes wrong. And basically, this provides a peace of mind to all the people in the company to understand that we have a fair and just culture in place. Another important element which I would like to highlight before I close my speech is that we need to provide the right tools to our seafarers. How can they actually operate the vessels? We need to ensure that they have the latest technology. We need to make sure that we don't overburden them with an endless number of paperwork, and they have the proper digital solution on board the vessels in order to manage the operation and the reporting systems. I think, as an EDNOC, we always, invest and we try to be on top of the game when it comes to the latest technology. And thanks to all the stakeholders, we would like also to appreciate the effort that the flag state for supporting the seafarers all this time during the extending of these certificates when it expired, because we couldn't get them off. We also appreciate the support of the classification societies because they continued to support us and even accommodate virtual inspections and surveys while it was never tried before. Again, we also would like to appreciate the effort of the oil majors when we actually carried out virtual sire inspections. Again, it's never been tried before, but everything we found solutions for. And because we all as stakeholders work as a team for the one goal. Thank you very much, Nikhil.
Captain Mohammed, your enthusiasm and your support for seafarers is very well documented on LinkedIn. And I know that ADNOC really follows the highest standards, and I've personally been involved with business with ADNOC. So really, y'all set the benchmark for excellence. So thank you for sharing those very valuable and practical thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist is the one who has published a white paper relevant to today's discussion. Zarir, please share with us why you are so passionate about seafarers' welfare and briefly enlighten us on the contents of your white paper.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Nick, appreciate the initiation you've taken on this, and you have the same passion towards seafarers, being one yourself, as I do. I have no doubt about it. And I think there is somewhere in the hearts of everyone, we all got an echo from what Captain Muhammad Ali mentioned a while ago. Thank you for mentioning the white paper. I just thought that we've had enough talk about when we get the news of seafarers being criminalized and being used as scapegoats, or rather, I might say, in the language of ship managers and ship owners, are in the line of fire. Unfortunately, the bullet passes through them, maybe not being targeted towards them. I think that is more appropriate that they are used as foot soldiers and as sacrificial anodes, much in engineering terms. And no better person than somebody who is promoting paints these days would understand the value of a sacrificial anode. But saying that, let me quote what Times of India, our national newspaper of the seafarers who are on board this unfortunate vessel, has to mention. They have quoted Medwave Shipping Agency mentioning this quote: Egypt has formally arrested MV Ever Given container ship with a court order issued by the Court of Islamia City pending a compensation payment of $900 million, unquote. This is in today's newspaper. I can't be more fresh and relevant in mentioning this. There is a lot of confirmation and revalidation to this Medwave Shipping Agency's tweet today, which the newspaper has quoted, and in our national newspaper. But I would not be surprised that this would be the way things might transpire if this is not already so, and it is not true. Now, this is something that we were anticipating. Being involved in claims, I'll keep this short. I would mention that I have seen enough in the number of claims that are mentioned on my profile, not all done by me, but our team, that we have seen seafarers or master mariners, senior officers rather, in very compromising position, in tears, especially when there's injury, there is death on board, there is a threat of pollution, there have been tears rolling, and we, or rather I, have been witness to some first-hand grief. Not everything ends up in court, not everything ends up being talked about. But having seen the grief of our seafarers firsthand, I thought it was time to stand up well in time, ahead of things that might take place and may go in the way that might be incrementally damaging to their peace of minds, to the sanity of everybody on board, and perhaps more importantly, those wise minds who are watching all this unfold and are considering to take up seafaring as a career. And when they know that this is what a seafarer has to go through, and they listen to all these arrests, etc., I'm sure ADNOC LNS would want more locals from the UAE to join their fleet and things. But when they hear about this kind of mudslinging or this kind of torment master and the crew go through, or engineers go through on board, I'm sure they would be somewhere thinking twice about it and perhaps looking at other careers. And you know, the last thing you want is that when we joined the sea, it was looked upon as a career. It was a career where there was a lot of worldly awareness that one would get by being a seafarer, by being paid well as compared to other professions. And I wanted somewhere that respect and integrity of the profession to be maintained, and that was my motive, to be ahead of time, to anticipate trouble perhaps for the seafarers before it actually happens. And this is the reason why I put my hand up and said that let me take a stand on it before things are really in a position where we are helpless and we are just left criticizing. We are like these, you know, the old grannies who, you know, talked about all the good things, but then they basically end up being remorse about a lot of bad things happen these days. This is how life has become. In our times, it was good. So before I turn into one of those old men, with all due respect to them, I wanted to take up this cause, and thanks to the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology to stand up for it. I'm grateful, and I hope the right ears are listening to this, and it ends up becoming a course that is steered in favor of the sympathy that the seafarers on board this unfortunate vessel deserve. I hope the right ears, the right legal advisors, the right owners, the right ship managers are listening to this and try to do something about making this easy for them. It's already being very, very tormenting, but I hope it falls on the right ears, our voice and our stand and something is done in a positive sense. That's all I would like to mention in my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Zarir, in my enthusiasm to hear your thoughts, I'm sorry I forgot to introduce you. Captain Zarir Irani represents a flag, actually, Antigua and Barbuda, as their exclusive regional director for UAE and Singapore. Over 29 years of work experience in the maritime industry, of which 17 years as an independent surveyor, having concluded 23,000 nominations as principal of Constellation Marine. A master mariner holding MCA Class 1 license, unlimited foreign going, valid until 2022. And I like that quote from Zarir, which says, a surveyor delivers trust and accountability by his independent and unbiased report. Thank you very much, Zarir, for sharing your thoughts. The last panelist that I'm honored to introduce is the legal Richard Strub. Richard is a partner at HFW, having first joined the firm as a trainee in 2002. He advises clients in all aspects of shipping and the carriage of goods by sea, with particular emphasis on disputes arising out of charter parties and bills of lading, as well as collisions, groundings, and maritime casualties. Richard also advises commodity traders and producers on all aspects of their business, including in particular physical sale, purchase, and transportation. He assists and represents clients in dispute resolution in commodities and freight-related matters. He specializes in particular in energy and bulk commodities. Richard's clients include ship owners and operators, charterers, P&I clubs, and underwriters, as well as cargo owners and traders. He also regularly lectures on shipping and trade issues. Richard is ranked in Chambers Global Guide 2021 and is noted as an excellent lawyer, well-versed in handling contentious shipping matters. Interesting to the discussion today. Richard, thanks for agreeing to participate in today's discussion.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the invitation. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you also for the kind introduction. I wrote that quote myself. For those of you that don't know HFW, we're an international law firm with particular focus upon the maritime and transportation industries and international trade. And so when presented with this topic, I come at it from the point of view of looking at the legal position in relation to the criminalization of seafarers. Now, I have to say, and as I'm a lawyer, getting my disclaimers at the beginning, that HFW is involved in some way in the Ever Given incident. So I can't speak to that specifically, but I can discuss the topic in sort of broad and general terms, as it's not a unique situation aboard the Ever Given, unfortunately. So when we talk about criminalization of seafarers, we're talking about crew or individual crew members facing detention, criminal charges arising out of an incident on board, or a casualty or damage or pollution, and so on. And seafarers are often described as being a uniquely vulnerable group, and that's absolutely correct. It's a truism that shipping in the maritime industry is, it's uniquely international. But what that means from a legal standpoint is that you get interaction between very different laws that aren't necessarily all harmonized. We have the law of the flag state, port, state, and coastal, domicile of the seafarer, penal and criminal codes, but also then countries' treaty obligations and membership of international organizations such as IMO and ILO and so on. As there isn't harmonization between these laws, the seafarer finds themselves often, through no fault of their own or through an incident, right in the middle of this maelstrom. I think it was Captain Ali mentioned, and Vikas at the beginning as well, they're often scapegoated. They are the face of this incident. They're the face of their owners and of their companies at that time, and they are the party present in the jurisdiction, whereas owners, managers, insurers are elsewhere. And so they find themselves often, unfortunately, as the scapegoat. And there have been some very famous incidents, moving away from the Ever Given, but but over time, I mean, we have just to pick a few, we have the Prestige, where the master was imprisoned, I believe, for 8 months and fined. The Hebai Spirit, where the master and the chief officer were both jailed for criminal negligence and fined, but eventually on appeal were acquitted and sent home, but that was only after 550 days of being deprived of their liberty. Numerous other examples, Tasman Spirit, Costa Concordia, and so on. But these are the famous ones, and these are the ones that make the press, and it's right that these should be the springboard for these discussions, but this kind of thing happens on a daily basis in many, many, many ports around the world, and no country is immune from it, where crew are detained, whether on board or ashore. They are brought in for questioning on sometimes serious, sometimes trivial charges, and they don't necessarily have the protection that they require and deserve. Now, the IMO and the ILO have produced guidelines for the fair treatment of seafarers during these investigations, and I think that's key. When these incidents happen and a seafarer is taken ashore, it's imperative that they're told what they're facing in a language they understand, and they're not presented with statements in a foreign language that they're just asked to sign, that they have access to consular officials, trade unions, even just a witness, but principally lawyers as well, to protect their rights. And they're actually given access to speak to their families and so on, rather than just put in a dark room and told to sign an admission. And in relation to these admissions as well, it's, oftentimes it can be a minor thing, and they can be on their way with admission of liability and so on. But you've got to be very careful with these things. It can lead to fines and imprisonment and so on, but also their employability going forward. With an admission of guilt on anyone's record, it really affects their ability to trade as particularly as officers and particularly on board specialist vessels. So the key in these situations is having that voice and that representation for a seafarer. And it starts at the ground level with all the witnesses and so on, but it goes all the way up through lobbying, government, diplomacy, and so on to end these types of incidents. I think, as Vikas said, I think the key is ensuring a fair hearing and ensuring not only a fair hearing, but that it takes place quickly, so that the seafarer can be repatriated back to his or her family. That's my intro.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Richard, and in fact, all of the other 5 panelists. Now let's get our friends from the audience involved. In fact, let's look at some of the questions which were submitted by participants during registration. You may also post your questions in the chat box. And when you do so, please end the question with a question mark, so we are aware it's a question and not a comment. And speaking of which, please refrain from water cooler conversations, which is the online equivalent of talking in the back of the lecture hall. It's pretty disruptive. Some of the questions raised are perhaps out of naivety, and I believe there are no silly questions, only silly answers. So my humble request to you panelists would be to patiently respond and dive into basics if need be. After all, the intended outcome of the webinar is to give fairness. And with that, we move on to the first question. This question is asked by Heiko, and Heiko asks, the role of the media is given wrongly, or alleged information and rumors to the public world, which leads into blaming of the ship's crew without any objective evidence. How could this be managed in future? I think I would ask our last speaker to take this one up and give us a little bit legal approach before we open it up for the other panelists. So, Richard, would you like to comment on this?
Well, thank you. As you say, there are no stupid questions, and this is a particularly good one.
Yes.
I think there is a certain difficulty in, talking about how we might tame the media. and how we might regulate the media and what they say. Particularly, in jurisdictions where there is freedom of speech, there's always going to be difficulty in misreporting of incidents, and there's going to be a sensationalization in order to sell newspapers. I think the key is when we get involved in casualties, the key is managing the media and managing what information is sent out. It's about ring fencing your witnesses, it's about ring fencing your evidence, and who talks to whom about what. And there are all sorts of sort of media consultants who make a living out of casualties in dealing with exactly this. So there is that side of it. But one of the points I would make is the media isn't necessarily the devil in these situations, because, for example, when you have situations where seafarers are treated unfairly or that they are detained, the media can shine a real spotlight on these issues. And so we shouldn't necessarily always think about the media as someone we should keep out. They can be made to work for us in, bringing to the plight to the attention of the right people who have influence to do something about it.
Oh, yeah. While my glass is empty, you obviously see the glass half full, and that's very positive. Yes, so the media at times could actually be beneficial for a situation. Well, I know that Vikas probably manages the maximum number of ships on this panel. Yeah, because if the number is right top of my head, the Anglo-Eastern Group manages 500 ships. I'm pretty sure as a result of which you have a dedicated team who handles the media. So would you like to sort of tell us a little bit about how the media can be blamed, or as like Richard said, that it can be a positive thing? Because
thanks, Nikhil. As Richard rightly mentioned, there are media consultants, and the important thing I think in any situation is to keep the information provided to the media to what is factual. Do not put any conjecture, ifs, buts are totally out. What is factual? Just mention that briefly, and I think that helps. Also, as Richard mentioned, media consultants. Yes, we all big management companies, all companies basically have media consultants, and they do help. But in general, it should be just kept to the facts and no conjecture. So I think you have to, as he said, the media is going to be after you to get something out, and you call it TRP or selling their paper or whatever it is. They need that. They need to be fed with some information, but as I said, just keep it to the basics and factual. Thanks. Nikhil, you're on mute.
Would any of the other panelists like to share some of your views?
Michael, I would like to introduce something also regarding this point.
Please.
As you know, Panama Flag also we have advisors regarding the media, how to say the information, how to release the information. In this case, but we have to understand something by the IMO Casualty Investigation Code. Okay, the international institution who lead those kinds of incidents who affect the marine sector is the IMO. Below the IMO in this case should be designated the investigating state. Investigating state is the state directly involved in this situation. And after that, we have the flag administration, we have the technical support, we have substantially interested parties. We have, for example, one substantially interested parties we can say is the classification society. Others, we have also independent investigations coming from these substantially interested parties. But at the end of the day, it will be designated a lead investigator, okay? And then my point, due to the question, is that the investigating state is the first who have to release the information to the media. only the fact that we can publish in the media should be coming from the investigating state. And the other point, which is related with the legal advisor opinion, is that the IMO code investigation is only to find the root cause of the incident. It's not to blame or to accuse any seafarer. It's not, the investigation have not any criminal objective or to found any responsibility, legal responsibility, or even financial responsibility. This is only to find the root cause and to avoid it happen again, and also to help the IMO technicians and legal partners to prepare regulation to avoid those incidents happening again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we move on to the next question. And in fact, it's a comment from Kishant Negi from the V Group. And he says it's a very good and important topic. This is the burning issue with seafarers. But I guess this is his question part. He would like to know how this can be addressed and given solutions and not advice. Interesting. Octavio, maybe you pick this up, because this is obviously, I look at it as a flag-related matter.
Okay. In this case, maybe it's not directly related with the topic, but I think that we can talk about that, because thanks to the mediation of the Panama Maritime Authority through the General Directorate of Seafarers, the payment of around $2 million in wages owed by the ship owners to the seafarers was acquitted, while around 539 repatriations were carried out on Panamanian flag vessels in various parts of the world by the end of 2020. Really, this pandemic situation changed our procedures in order to be more at the line of the seafarers regarding the situation on board. Most of them in abandoned conditions regarding the salaries. But the more important for us, I think the more important for us is the enforcement of the Declaration of the Maritime Labor Convention, Part 1, which is a document who confirm the complement of the Maritime Labor Convention on board the Panamanian flag vessels, which is related with the minimum age. Panama, we have 18 years old, regarding the medical certificates, regarding the seafarers employment agreement, hours of work, and hours of rest on board, which is, as you know, the minimum hours of rest shall not be less than 10 hours in any 24 hours, and around 77 hours in any 7 days period. Also, it's related with the manning levels for the ship, which is the regulation 2.7, related with the all Panamanian flag vessels shall require have a sufficient number of seafarers on board to ensure the safety, accommodation, several points regarding, for example, the regulation 3.2, which is related with the food and catering and onboard recreational facilities. All the Panamanian flag vessels, which 500 tons and above, should comply with this Declaration of Maritime Labor Compliance Part 1. And the vessels from 200 gross tonnage up to 499 should apply voluntarily, if they want, to this declaration. That's, for us, is very important. As you know, several ship owners have bring the ships to be abandoned in the Middle East sometimes, and then we have to deal with the repatriation. We have to deal with the maintenance of the vessel and the crew on board. We have to take care of the salaries. And it is only possible when the ship is abandoned, it is only possible because the vessel have the declaration of maritime labor compliance. And the blue card, which is the financial security given by the insurance company, which is executed immediately after the vessel is declared in abandoned condition. This is very important for us. We take care of this through our annual safety inspectors around the world, being sure that those declarations are valid on board the vessel in any time, even if the vessel go to a short trip, for example, a single voyage for a scrap, they need to give to us the valid blue cards issued by the insurance company, which is securing the vessel in the case of the vessel being abandoned at the port of arrival, that the crew member will be repatriated. They will receive the salary, at least 4 months of salaries, and the vessel will be kept in safety conditions. For example, payment of water, oil, petrol, food on board, up to the crew member be repatriated. And we have some numbers. For example, here we have been repatriated 539 people around the world from this last month regarding these different situations. Most of those vessels also are arrested by the court. More of them arrested by the mortgagee, and then they have different cases.
Thank you, Octavio. Captain Mohammed, perhaps you may want to share with us the guidelines you have in place for your fleet personnel.
What do you mean by the guidelines in terms of what, Nikhil?
Now, when we talk about welfare, seafarer welfare, how is
it? With regard to the welfare, I mean, we over the tour of duty, anybody who stayed longer, we started, issuing them compensation. We started to offer them, free telephone calls to contact their families, and even a gift voucher when they are actually leaving the vessel to buy something for their families when they're going home. For me, all of this at the end, it will have a temporary effect. It will have, a good impact to boost the morale at the initial stage. But what really, I think, get us through the whole challenge is the close communication. And, I was personally, meeting with them every week or two, and opening the floor for, even our CEO was meeting them once a month, opening the floor for any questions, any concerns to be raised. That close communication was very, very crucial. And in terms of, also training, I mean, we have, in our plan usually to have face-to-face workshops that we gather, group of seafarers. This was quite challenging too, of course, during the pandemic. We couldn't do it. So we had to go through virtual. And it was quite interesting. The numbers we used to get in the virtual was much higher because the people on leave was also participating, as well as people in the office. People on the vessels. And so it was quite effective in a way that we continued the training, we continued the communication with the seafarers through this challenging period. And I think all the seafarers who worked for ADNOC, they recognize the efforts we played to look after their welfare.
Thank you for sharing that, Captain Mohammed. Let's move on to the next question. It says the role of numerous governments, including IMF, during COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the year 2020, with respect to crew change. Pardon. Crew change. So you mentioned that, Vikas, earlier. How did you manage this huge fleet, with especially thousands of your seafarers being exchanged on a daily basis?
That's correct, Nikhil. A very challenging situation. as Mr. Muhammad Ali also mentioned, we too, in our own way, we did some of the things which are very similar to what they did on their fleet. We also went in for where crew was delayed relief compensations to the crew, and increased the communication bandwidth as well as the time for each crew member so that they can be in touch with their loved ones at home. As far as reliefs go, what we tried, or we were successful to a certain extent in doing, and that's why we reached the figures that we did, was towards the middle part or the latter part of 2020, at least, because most of our crew is employed out of India. With the airlines not operating, we had only chartered flights from India from Delhi or Mumbai, actually in particular, to Doha. And from Doha, you had to fly them out to various places in the world. We actually, in some cases, because of the flight situations, we actually had to fly crew to Europe and then get them to Singapore in certain cases. Can you believe that? But we did go, and that's why in my initial address also I said we thank our ship owners also, who have really supported not only us but the crew in these difficult times. Of course, with delayed relief, it has its own challenges for the crew on board. I'm talking about. There have been certain times where the reliever has flown to wherever the vessel is, and unfortunately, just before boarding, he is turned positive. So the guy on board, he cannot be relieved. So it's such a depressing situation for the person who's on board who wants to go home, actually. So we also have psychologists on our panel and our welfare team in our offices in Mumbai. And they actually speak to the people on board in such cases. Our welfare team in Mumbai also contacts the seafarers if they have any concerns with people at home, because we've got offices in many parts of India. So it's easier to reach their residents and try and assist their families. Some people have, I'm sorry to be so elaborative, but they have older parents who need assistance, or their wife is alone and the child is unwell, whatever the case may be. So we try and assist them in the best way possible, so that our seafarers is rest assured that his family also is being taken care of while he is at work, and he cannot deal with the daily problems at home that they may be having. And the whatever communication we have with the family, whatever the status, that is communicated back to the ship through our welfare team in Mumbai. And so we've tried to do as much as possible. Well, whatever you can do is still less, I would say, in these circumstances. But we have tried in our own way to do whatever to comfort them as much as possible during these trying times.
Yeah, thanks, Vikas, for putting on the table not only the challenges of crew change during the COVID, but also the solutions that Anglo Eastern has provided. So thanks for sharing your views. The next question is for Captain Zari Rerani. And this is to do with the guarantees from Club not accepted in the Suez port. This is a legal battle, as no one has been harmed and could take some time. Does the port around the world has the power to keep holding ship cargo and crew indefinitely? Asks Srikanth.
Yep, small correction. It's for the legal eagle, for Richard, but I'll simply put one statement here since you called my name out. If somebody came at home and made a mess at your house, created a ruckus, damaged property, would you go out, lock the door before he leaves? and ask him to compensate you, or would you just let him go and run after him for the rest of your life? I don't want to give the answer out. The answer is obvious, but I'll leave Richard to give this answer because I think it's correct to be. Richard is more of a legal answer to this of club guarantees, etc. So if they don't trust the club, I don't know what else is to be done. But Richard, over to you, mate.
Yeah, I think that's right. As I said at the beginning, I can't speak to the Ever Given particularly, so I can't speak as to what the Egyptian authorities are doing and what the club is doing in response and so on. But speaking generally, it is the case that a coastal state under the UN, a coastal state cannot retain a vessel indefinitely if adequate bail or bond has been proposed or posted. Yeah. So there is that right within UNCLOS. All these things that, but I mean, what we're dealing with here really in these situations is a territory that has sovereignty over its own waterways and territorial seas, and it determines, its rights in that regard and its treaty obligations. And so, you're left with the question sort of answers itself really. It's like, well, what can you do in that situation? And it comes down to providing adequate bail and bond to get the vessel out, and/or diplomatic pressure or other form of commercial discussion in order to release it. And in the meantime, of course, bringing it back to our discussion, in the meantime, of course, it's the seafarer who bears the brunt of this because he sits there waiting for things to be sorted out over which he or she has absolutely no control.
Right. Okay, let's move on to our next question. And this is actually a comment from Mohammed Beg. And he says, issues related to sign on and sign off are being toughened in the name of security. That's true. COVID-19 has made that issue far too complex. All countries are allowing ships to call their ports, but only a few ports are allowing crew changes. That too with lots of conditions and complications. Can this biased attitude of authorities be addressed at some platform? Anybody care to comment?
Nikhil, I'll chip in here, but
Please.
I'm afraid it's a very general comment rather than being specifically focused on crew changes. And Richard, sorry if I'm stepping on your legal toes here, but I've been a surveyor for the past 12, nearly 13 years. And so my Bibles have been MARPOL, SOLAS, and the ABS rules. And I think one of the primary challenges is the speed of legislative change. So you look at ABS's rules, for example, we own them. They were developed by us over the last 168 years. And for us to change those rules is relatively straightforward. There is a process, but it can be done within a week or a month, something like that. If you're looking at changing a statutory instrument like MARPOL or SOLAS or MLC or whatever it is, it's not only that, the legislation change needs to be proposed, it then needs to be adopted by the members, and that is by its nature a very laborious and slow process, and also it's reactive. So, it would be fantastic if we could get to the point where we had a mechanism where we were predicting the required legislative changes. But if you look at SOLAS, for example, was developed after the Titanic. Right. The North Sea Safety Case regulations were developed after Piper Alpha. Legislation by its nature, it tends to be reactive. And I think that, we're only just getting to a point more than a year into this pandemic where crew changes are actually happening with any real meaning. And I just think that's a reflection of the speed at which government organizations work. And it's frustrating for all of us, I think. So yeah, I'm afraid it's slightly general comment, but one that I wanted to make nonetheless.
Oh, thanks, valuable, Chris. Can we move on to the next question, please? Yeah, this one's asked by Mr. Raghunath, and he says, how does an individual qualify for a Panama flag surveyor? I guess that's pretty straightforward. Who's going to be speaking about Panama flag?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Of course, I would like to tell you that we have a procedure in order to get some surveyors around the world and be part of the list of those experienced professionals that on behalf of the Panama Flag, we have kind of internal audit, because as you know, the vessel should be inspected in several times. The classification society who issue the certificate on behalf of the class by the port state control when the vessel arrives to the port, and also we have another inspection, which is annual safety inspection given by the Panamanian surveyors or any other surveyors appointed by the Panama Flag. Of course, I will be glad to receive your email or your question. I will post my email, then you can send me, and I will follow the procedure with you. I will send you the information, and I will give you the how do you can apply for this position. Thank you.
Thanks, Octavio. Can we move on to the next question, please? Number 6. And this is actually a comment, but it's got a question mark there. Well, it's Mohammed Bey again, and he says, seafarers are always at the receiving end, always struggling to comply with hundreds of regulations enforced upon them. Shore leave and sign on and sign off issues were well known to all of us. Very true. Worst is the denial to free access to medical assistance in many ports of the world. Spot on. Is it not criminalization of seafarers? If so, what is being done or can be done about it? Anybody care to pitch in?
I can take this one. Okay, please, Mohammed, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to comment that, unfortunately, this is the reality, and this is a very complicated trade. This is a really international. You have on the ship itself a flag state. You have so many port different authorities that the ship is actually calling, and in order to and each country and flag, they have different rules. To actually bring everybody to a very common ground. Even IMO struggled. I think IMO issued guidelines, and encouraging. There are so many also associations, like Intermanager. They tried so hard. I think the only way is, that each ship owner really look after the seafarers and try to support them to the best that they can. Because to have, one common solution, I think, let's face it, it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's unfortunately true, Captain Mohammed. And, I think the point which is hitting home the strongest over here is the fact that medical assistance, and that's, we hear so many stories. There's been an accident on board and the guy has lost a limb or at least part of it, and then administration.
We suffered from this, Nikhil. I mean,
oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, I mean, we had to engage our ambassador, to actually find a solution, and eventually we did. But it's just not easy, and because we are a government company, we have this leverage,
Yes.
And others may not have the same,
No.
And it could be very challenging, and fortunately, some ports in the world, they deny seafarer right to actually be, evacuated.
Exactly.
And this is true, and we faced it a number of times.
Nikhil, can I come in here?
Please, Vikas.
Yeah, no, it's me, Zarif. May I say that there is, in the context of the UAE, and like UAE, I am reliably confident that there would be many more in many more countries which will have the solution. But if a seafarer today in port calls sick, I know of at least a dozen cases where doctors have actually visited the vessel rather than them having to come down. Yes, it's costly. Yes, it is requiring a lot of port entry barriers which the doctor or the paramedics face. But in UAE, I am very confident about saying that they actually visit the vessel. And there should be this known to most ship managers and owners that there are more countries than not that actually prefer to send a medic on board and treat a seafarer or two, rather than let him take the risk of coming to a hospital or a clinic where he might be exposed. It's much safer the other way around. This is something that I would like to point out here in direct reply to Mohammed Beg's answer. It is not always and every time a pitiful situation when you just think about it. Denial of free access to medical assistance in ports, I don't think is as rampant in most of the countries unless the vessel is at anchorage or a hard to reach port or a port which is really remote. That's all my input is.
Thank you. Can we move on to question 7, please?
Michael, only one commentary.
Yes, Octavio.
Always something happened with the seafarer on board. Immediately, the people put the responsibility over the shoulder of the ship owner, which is not correct. Most of the time, the countries, the arrival ports and authorities, they have the responsibility to prepare the conditions to those seafarers need medical treatment to be attended. I already shared the IMO link, which you can see what countries in the world have considered already the seafarers as a key workers. Then you can see the effort, the big effort made by the IMO and the ILO in order to encourage the countries to, all of them, make regulations taking in account that the seafarers be considered as a key workers.
One thing, sorry, can I, one thing which has been, as Zarir said, there are many ports where they allow doctors to come on board, or they prefer that sort of arrangement, which is perfectly okay, and it's safer too. Also, we have been using the services of remote medical advice, and it's not actually only a phone call or anything. You can have a video conference now with all this new technology which we are using today also. So actually, the doctor is talking to the patient, seeing what the problem is physically, and not photographs going here and there. So it's much easier. So this has actually helped in the number of visits to the doctor, because let's say the vessel is out at sea, and how do you help the guy? It's not even in port. So this is the best way, and probably and most often actually I would say that before the ship reaches port, he is cured, or he is much better than what he was. He may not have to visit the doctor too. So remote medical advice, not only in today's time where it is of course much more required, has been quite a boon actually, and with technology obviously. Thanks.
Interesting. Wow. Once again, like Chris earlier alluded to, there would be leverage on contemporary technology to attain efficiencies. Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Vikas. Can we move on to question 7, please? And this one's by Mr. Alu Walia, and he says, "What is the way forward for sailing masters and advice for shipping companies and management companies?" Zarir, I'm not sure if you understand what is the way forward for sailing masters and advice for shipping companies and management companies.
Well, for ship masters, the way has always been forward. Except for when they're maneuvering and they ask the engine room for stern propulsion. But
sometimes the fuller stern is also essential.
Yes, indeed. But jokes apart, let me answer this very simply. Because it was a pre-assigned question and I was purview to it. Let me say to shipmasters, the way forward, and also in the hindsight of what incidents have happened or experiences, it's been only one: stay truthful, stick to the fact, keep it short and simple. the famous KISS format, KISS. Keep it short and simple. This is absolutely key. No matter what your superintendent says, no matter what your advisors or anybody says, towards blurring or restraining any information, the shipmaster must log truthful information, short, sweet, and simple. As long as a shipmaster does that, trust me, nobody can point a finger towards it. Even if he knows his ship and his crew were wrong in a certain aspect, even if he knows that there might be blame coming onto the owner, even if he knows he himself has made a mistake in his maneuvering or anything, it is absolutely important for a shipmaster to keep it truthful, keep it short, and keeping it simple. Please pass this on, or if there are shipmasters listening, I cannot emphasize on it. I do not know, Richard, being on the legal side, would give me a nod on it, but this is from my experience. Things start getting complicated when things are hidden, things are falsified, things are flogged for protecting A, B, or C interest. It never, ever gets done. It only delays the process. It only has ships delayed, arrested, and more questions being asked. Eventually, the truth will prevail. It has been in most cases, and it will continue to be so. So the way forward for sailing masters is that. Shipping companies, please, I have a question later for Vikas, being part of the management company, but shipping companies must prepare the masters, prepare the crew mentally, must talk to their families to make them understand that it is not about necessarily criminalizing them, but there will be delays in him coming back home. There will be questions asked. There will be low moments in those questions being asked. There will be moments of depression. In terms of this famous case, I'm sure there will be some worried moments. The master may have had some cause of concern. His family may have raised to the management company concerned. But it is damn important for the shipping companies to make this communication clear. Let them know what to expect. Keep talking to them, keep mentoring them, probably have the psychiatrists involved, like Vikas was mentioning earlier. This is where it is extremely important and vital, and be as less demanding on the ship's master and crew as possible. Multiple instructions coming from multiple areas, superintendent, the fleet manager, the safety manager, every man, his dog and the other in the management company. If he talks to the ship's master, from his perspective, that's a clear disaster situation. So that is, simply put, my small input into this. I'm nobody to say that, but I have enough field experience of this being a complete crazy situation for the master, where he doesn't know whom to listen to. And we actually come in as P&I club, and somebody says, please listen to your P&I club. He's your club. Eventually the third party claim is going to be paid by him. So he's asking us, that everyone's saying their own thing and also saying, I'm supposed to listen to your advice and carry on with it. If there is a lawyer involved, there will be definitely an instruction also to listen to the lawyer. So that's going to tear him apart. So this is what my simple suggestion is: keeping it simple and direct, and keep talking to them. Maybe a one-point contact, which I'm sure in most emergency and disaster management plans, it is already prevailing. But that's my answer to this question.
I think in the interest of time.
Sorry, Nikhil, just to carry on with what Zarir said, and he said that he would direct something to me,
Later.
to me too.
Not now, later.
So I would like to just respond to that for a minute. I don't know what your exact question was, but I think I get the drift of it. So that's why I'm answering. In case of an emergency or anything like that, we have a team, we have like an emergency response team in our office, which is set up. And that team actually remains in place till the problem is sorted out. All right. Whether it doesn't matter how long it is for, because then we go in rotation. And all communication from our office, at least, whether it is phone conversations or emails or whatever it will be, will go only through that team, emergency response team. The master or whoever is concerned calls up only to that dedicated number, phone number, which is totally dedicated for this. So that those sort of things are in place. Now, coming back to that, the importance of keeping the families involved and informed, I would say, that role is taken by our manning office in India, or wherever the case may be, whichever manning office it concerns. And they keep in touch with the families and updated on the situation. I mean, on a daily basis if required, or depending on the situation, how it be. So the families are informed. And as I said earlier also, that is conveyed back to the ship staff, so that everybody knows that, you know, there is communication between the office and the family, and help as required is always provided to the families too. I hope that answers your question to some extent, at least.
It's not my question, but I think between you and me, I think we've made Mr. B.S. Ahluwalia get the point across.
Zarid, you mentioned something about maneuvering, and that's the next question. And this is something which is very interesting. So can we move on to the next question? So let's not only look at the law, but let's just look at it in general. Yes. And Captain Panda asked, ship's crews trained and certified as per STCW convention, which is primarily for safety at sea, as per the preamble. Then when the vessel meets casualty in inland waters or canals under mandatory pilotage, which law absolves the pilot of liability instead of the master? Richard, would you be in a position to comment?
Yeah, objection, leading question, I think. That presupposes, you know, that the law absolves the pilot of liability instead of the master. But actually, I think that is the case. It is the law of the territory. You know, I will stand to be shouted down by the masters with considerable experience on this call. But you know, the way it works is that although a pilot is on board the vessel, the overall responsibility remains with the master. He has command, but the pilot has the comm. So, you know, it's not a question of saying that, you know, the pilot is absolved of responsibility. I mean, he is taken on to the vessel in a certain capacity, and you know, things go wrong, but ultimately, you know, the master is in overall control of his vessel, and that's, you know, a matter of the law of the land.
If I didn't have to take a legal angle, if I just had to let my common sense prevail, then I'm just wondering, you have taken a vessel in a foreign land, foreign waters you know little about, and then you have a pilot on board who knows everything about that, those restricted waters. Common sense again. Who should be calling the shots here? I mean, of course, that's a comment. I'd be happy if somebody can bring this kind of a discussion onto the table, because it's related to Captain Panda's question. And yeah, please.
I think, well, my sort of overly legal take on it would be, again, that it is the pilot calling the shots. But there's a difference between calling the shots and being responsible for the shots.
I think there's a logbook entry which says something along the lines, and correct me, Pastor, isn't there the pilot's advice and master's responsibility or something like that?
Yeah, and there's the pilot handover card and everything else. I mean, you know, if the pilot comes on board and he's sort of, I don't know, visibly drunk or impaired, or there's some kind of problem, and the master allows him to continue, then there's an obvious culpability. But I entirely accept your point, and common sense dictates. You know, this the guy who knows his waters. He knows where the banks are. He knows where the turns are, etc. And
exactly.
But I mean, legally speaking, the law tends to be of the view that, you know, ultimate responsibility for the casualty rests with the master. So again, though, you know, this doesn't necessarily, well, it can lead to seafarer criminalization, but more often this is directed towards insurance and P&I, because, you know, a vessel causes an incident, let's say bangs into a berth or a terminal. It's the terminal operator wants to arrest that vessel and wants to have rights of recourse against, you know, rights of arrest, for which the vessel has third-party liability insurance. And so it flows through the master as the servant of the owners who are the insured to get that in place. If the pilot is responsible, that dynamic changes.
Yeah, can I add something here, Nikhil? I think Captain Panda is on, and I had discussed this on with him. If he wants to come in and add in his valuable comments to my white paper, he has elaborated a little bit more, and I would appreciate if you permit, Captain Panda may come in with his experience as being the chief examiner for masters and mates and being an advisor to the government of India. He might, I'm sure, have a lot to add to this question in terms of clarity. Captain Panda, please.
Yeah, thanks, Zarir, and thank you for giving me this liberty. Having served Government of India for well over 25 years and having retired as Chief Examiner of Master and Mates and Nautical Advisor to the Government of India, this question has been a burning question all over the world. I had taken up at the IMO forum, I had taken up at the ISF forum and every forum. When the vessel is under compulsory pilotage inside the inland waters or canals, agreed, it is written as master's order and pilot's advice. But as rightly Nikhil said, how much of control the master has, other than those exceptional circumstances as explained by Richard. Therefore, there is a need now to define the area of responsibility. Yes, if there is a mechanical failure, the ship is responsible, no doubt about it. But most of the cases, invariably the master is just crucified. During one of the investigations in India, which I was the investigator and the ship was a foreign flag, when the vessel was berthing, exactly the same situation. The harbor master was in command, in other words, as far as maneuvering is concerned, though on paper or in the logbook it was written as the master order and pilot's advice. But no, during the investigation, I, as the lead investigator, pinpointed the errors by the pilot and the harbor master, and they were penalized. But how many such incidences have taken place? If these take place, this will bring in confidence on the master and will certainly change the liability regime towards the authorities who are making this pilotage compulsory. Imagine a situation when the vessel is climbing up the locks in Panama Canal. How much of control the master has? The vessel is controlled by the mules. The pilot is in total control. In fact, the pilot has virtually no control. Then if anything happens, if the wires snap, then there can be catastrophic damages. Then can we say that the master was in command? Therefore, just because the archaic rules, I'm saying the archaic rules, puts the master as the owner's representative. So if you cannot catch the owner, catch the master. During the crucial time of piracy, allow me to say a few minutes more, please. During the crucial stages of piracy, when I had been negotiating with the pirates for release of Indian officers, the pirates or other authorities or other such people, they were not bothered about the ship or the cargo in it, but the men on board. Therefore, this ever given is no exception. And I fear the crew will be kept on board. And we all know it. Once the crew is relieved, then the ship can remain there till eternity, or the disputes can go on for a decade. This is the reality. But as rightly said by Zarir, the time has come for the marine community to deliberate these issues. Just because the archaic rules have put master as the owner's representative. Therefore, I have said, I have studied, being a competent person of the IMO, analyzing the STCW papers of various countries, the preamble is very clear. It is for the safety of the people and environment at sea. All states have joined together to make the uniform standard called as STCW. Therefore, even the legal community has to think it in that light. We have to have a paradigm shift in thinking so far as the human element in shipping is concerned. The criminalization, the crucifixion of seafarers is, along with the unfortunate incident of pandemic, is, I think, going a bit too far. We have to be sensitive and we have to be creative. I thank Indian Institute, Institute of Marine Engineers for taking this issue and look forward to such opportunities. It was a pleasure to share and hear everyone's views. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Zari talked about facts and relying on facts. And I think the next question is precisely that. Some 15 years back, vessels were mandated to install VDRs. Now, what is the probability that the real reason that led to the incident will be shared on the public domain, asked Mr. Uday Murthy. Will the VDR transcripts be revealed for a realistic understanding of the causation? Perfect, Uday, if you're online. And Richard, are you still on?
I am still on. Yeah, I'll take this question. Then apologies to everyone in the audience. I'm going to have to duck off to a meeting. Clients don't wait for their lawyer. Yes. So, look, after an incident, there is obviously going to be investigations. One of which is by flag state, and flag state will have access to the VDR and everything else they need to carry out their investigations. And flag states invariably publish their reports on their websites or however else, so they will be in the public domain. In terms of the VDR being transcripts being revealed, it depends to whom. If we're involved in a casualty and we're acting for an owner in relation to the vessel, this type of evidence is very much ring fenced, so that we are in control of the evidence in order to run our case. It will be disclosable in any legal proceedings that follow. So if that is arbitration, it'll be private, but if it's litigation, that will be public. And so that will be aired out, and the VDR transcripts and recordings and so on would be a matter of public record then. For a realistic understanding of the causation, yes, but often we find, particularly in a litigious situation, the VDR isn't necessarily, it's hotly contested as to who did what and what the evidence actually shows. It picks up all the screaming and subsequent phone calls on the bridge and so on. So a word to the wise to keep that to a minimum. But I think it ending up in the public domain, yes, but in a sort of an edited format through reports or through litigation, I think is the legalistic answer.
Thanks, Richard. And you sort of directed me to pull in our flag admin into this question. So
Thank you.
When an accident occurs, how does flag approach the human aspect and the technical aspect? And probably when I say technical aspect, VDR is the a major factor in that. Octavio.
Thank you. Yes, the VDR is very sensitive information. First of all, to take the information, the data on board, which is very difficult. If you don't have a technician with you as an investigator appointed by the flag or by the state, then you have to deal with the local agent and of course with the ship owner in order to they provide to you the technical technician who can take the information from the VDR. To take the information from the VDR, you have to have a specific software. In this case, sometimes a specific Windows XP, which is necessary, or if you don't have the XP, this information will not run in a different Windows. Okay. Then this information should be downloaded from the VDR most of the time to your computer as investigator, and then you will keep this information with you. Okay, you can hear the information, you can see all the videos, you can take all the data which is recorded, and then we are obligated to send this file to our flag, I mean to the principals, where we have a department, which is the Casualty Investigation Department for the Panama flag. We have to release and send all this information with the report, when we finish the report, to them. After that, the final report is reviewed in our principal office, our main office, and then we have to load in the GSIS. GSIS is the platform from the IMO, as you know. Only for investigation purposes, only for technical purposes, engineering purposes. It's nothing related with criminalization or a penalty or anything. Financially, don't have any consequences. That means the question, if you can release this for the media, the only way, the experience I had in the court is, even if it's a civil procedure, which is not a criminal procedure, the judge, I mean, this information will be held by the judge, by the court, privately. The only way that I can understand, the only way, in my opinion, that you can release this for the other person, if is the criminal procedure entered to see, if any criminal responsibility is over the person, which is related with the master or something like this, for any other reason different than the professional sailing and navigational responsibility that he have, then maybe it can be released for a specific purpose. But my experience I have, even in the court, is that this information is kept by the court in the case, if the case go to be dealt by the civil court, in order to get some responsibilities, financial responsibilities occur after the investigation, if they have some percentage of the responsibility from the vessel, or it's on some collision with the port, and then the port will claim against the vessel. In those cases, okay. Otherwise, the information in the case that you are appointed as an investigator, so as investigator, as you know, the information will be kept with you, and also with the flag or with the interested state.
Thank you, Octavio. Can we move on to the next question, please? Do you have anything to add on that one, Chris?
No, I think Octavio covered it pretty succinctly. The only thing that we have in ABS is something called RRDA, which is Rapid Response Damage Assessment Program. So I guess most most shipping organizations would be required by their charterer to either have an in-house naval architect basically on standby, or they will use their class society typically as their consultant naval architect essentially for damage. So we have all the drawings, you know, if they can explain you know, what damage has occurred in which compartments, the sizes and so on, then we can simulate that and give them advice as to how to rectify it. But no, nothing other than what Octavio mentioned.
Thanks, Chris. Zarir, Mr. Israni asks, will the issuing states of the COCs, of the personnel involved in the grouting, also be involved in the inquiry?
Well, simple question. If the competency is in question, then it will, or else it won't. It's giving you an example. I think I will pass it to Octavio because he would be the competent authority, because if this one was a flag state fact state, if it was an Antigua vessel, I would say that Antigua would have issued an equivalency certificate, endorsed the COC of the national authority of the seafarers, or wherever else he's done it from. Like, for example, in your case, it was Australia. So they would issue a cover note on saying whether they acknowledge your competencies issued through Australia or not. But so the issuing authority would be Panama. The vessel was flying Panama flag. But before I leave it to Victoria, I'd like to just simply put an example of our day-to-day lives. If you were walking in your kitchen, bumped your toe on the edge of the counter and injured yourself, would anyone question your competency in walking around safely? Well, if a master has one incident, he does not become incompetent, or his competency should not be questioned. That's all I'm saying. Accidents do happen. If you bump your toes, or if you drive in a weird way on Sheikh Zayed Road, all you'll do is get a fine, but your license probably won't be taken away from you unless you cross the 12 black point mark, by the way. And if you're really a cowboy, you would. But that's all I would say. This is a day-to-day example of what I consider this competency word being used and so loosely by everybody, including Mr. Israni. But I would like to have passed on the baton to the competent authority, the issuing state, which would be Panama in some cases, I'm sure, without giving reference to this.
Thank you, Zakir. First of all, I would like to introduce that Panama have the strong relation with all the career of the seafarer, starting from the beginning. For example, most of the training institutes, even in India, okay, which issue certificates, STCW certificates, most of them are approved by the Panama flag. Then we send the auditors. In this case, I have been in Mumbai several times, making inspections, making audits of those maritime training institutes. I can mention one, for example, Jack Marine, one of the biggest one. I can mention another one. They have a beautiful, very important training centers. From the beginning, we have a close relationship with the career of the seafarer in Panama. This is number one. Number two, we have a relation with the mining companies. The mining company, as you know, contracted or have a close relation also with the ship owners, who delegate the big and very important work to choose those crews for the fleet around the world. But you know, for us, only for mention one nationalities, as you know, the manpower who fulfill the fleet of Panama around the world, most of them from India, Philippines, Ukraine, and Russia. Okay. And second point, which is very important, 90% of the documents issued by Panama for officers are COE, I mean certificate of endorsement. Almost only 10% of this thousand of documents issued by Panama are COC, and most of them for Panamanian nationals, people who study already in the national maritime universities. Okay, this is very important to focus. That means that most of the persons who was on board the Ever Given, most of them hold the COE, certificate of endorsement, issued by Panama. But the COC for sure was issued by the whitelist country, approved by the who is responsible for the education. The question is very, very punctual. The question is, issuing states of the COCs of the personnel involved in the grounding also be involved in the inquiry? Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Because if we see that the human error was so evident, then we have to see how was the process from the issuing country to give this COC to this captain or officer, or even for the rating. Okay. Other thing I would like to add is that here in Dubai, for example, 95% of our job regarding seafarers, not regarding safety of navigation, safety of or statutory certificate. Regarding seafarers, 95% is COE issuing. I mean, we issue a lot of certificate of endorsement. Most of those COC came from those countries I mentioned already. But of course, we have to follow the regulation as per the 1/10 regulation from the STCW, and we have to check every document. We have to verify in the authority, the issuing authority, if the document is valid or not. Okay, most of those countries have online verification online, and also sometimes we have to call to the training centers to be sure that this course was given to this seafarer, etc., etc. But nowadays the world is very close, very small, excuse me. Then it's very easy for us. For example, if we receive a COC from Egypt, from even from any country, Slovenia, or for example, Russia, or even Portugal, every country we receive COC for application for COE, we can verify those documents. That means I don't think that they will have directly responsibility, but in the investigation for sure, for each of the officers in charge of the watch in this transit through the Suez Canal, we have to approach the issuing country in order to know if the procedure was doing correctly, if they don't have anything wrong. Okay.
Whilst I will request to move on to the next question, I'm not sure if you can see my Panamanian COC, Octavio.
Does that make you competent? Does that mean you're competent to be a chief engineer if it was valid?
Highly. Next question, please. So the question is to Vikas from Madhupille. What measures are taken to improve the mental strength of seafarers on board when they are forced to extend their contract?
I think we got some background noise.
Because
anyway,
can you take that one?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I think to an extent I've already answered this question.
Okay.
In the sense that for mental health, of course, as Captain Ali also mentioned earlier, we also have webinars, again, thanks to technology today, with seafarers, both who are at home as well as on board at the moment, trying to boost their morale and telling them what we are doing or what we can do to the best of our ability. And as for the mental strength, also we have psychologists. I told you about the medical team that we have in India, medical advisors. They have a psychologist. So they speak to the vessels. Our welfare team speaks to the vessels. We speak to the vessels. And of course, having said that, forced extended contracts, yes, I agree to a certain extent, but not forced by us per se. It's forced because of the circumstances that we all are in at the moment. Unfortunate case, but there's not too much that we can do. Whatever we can do, whatever is in our, whatever it's possible for us to do, we do extend every possibility to try and see that each one of our seafarers is relieved, if not on time, not unduly kept on board at any time. Thanks.
Thank you, Vikas. In the interest of time, we will take the last question, number 12, and this is the contentious one. And I wonder who is going to be answering this, because it is, oh, I thought I saw another one there, yeah? Right, that one was skipped. Technology is taking the lead everywhere, and shipping has also started to accept this change. However, one thing is obvious here, that the seafarer is at the receiving end to shoulder all the extra burden shrugged off to them from the shore. Now, would anybody want to challenge this allegation, or would you support it? And how would technology aid this decision?
Can I just speak for a short while?
Yes, because
well, technology is why we are here today, having this meeting, right? And that's what is bringing 200 participants, are we? Or whatever the number is, all of us together on the same platform.
Right.
So that's the power of technology today. And we can all share our thoughts, disseminate information, whatever the case may be. There is no intention, I think, from any quarter to shrug or put extra burden on the ship staff due to technology. In fact, I think it's the other way around, that this technology is also helping us support the ship staff in these trying times today. For one, if you talk about the day-to-day work on board the vessels, well, technology is trying to make that easier for them so that we can give remote guidance where required. And similarly, the ship staff is also at liberty to ask us similar questions that we may ask of them. If we are putting them in a spot, they can also put us in the spot. Actually, it's not putting each other in a spot. It is actually a cooperation between the two for the smooth running of the vessel. After all, you want a cargo to move from A to B efficiently, in time, and at the cheapest possible cost, so that it doesn't affect our pockets and everyone's pockets, whether on shore or at sea. So these things, technology is being used to enhance all these facilities that we are having today. So there is I'm not sure whether I have answered the question correctly, but I'm not sure also what the question was. What type of burden are we talking about of asking the ship staff to shoulder? I think it's a very open communication between the ship staff and the shore staff, and that's how it should be.
And of course, to a large extent, it would be the company culture which facilitates transparency in this communication. Well, there are lots and lots and lots more questions, and I do apologize to my friends out there in the audience. We have crossed the 2-hour barrier. Never in the history of the IMarEST have we done this. Not that we didn't want to, we never got the opportunity. So those of you who posed the questions but couldn't get a response, I would just humbly request if you send me them via email, and I will distribute them as was agreed prior to this discussion. I will post them to the appropriate panelists, and they will get back to you on a one-on-one basis. Now, going back to the last comment from Vikas Vij, while I come from a family of seafarers and was a seafarer myself, yet we must remember ships are operated to make a profit for the owners and not to provide employment for seafarers. With this balanced mindset, we must empathize the complexity of the global shipping business, as Captain Mohammed also alluded to earlier, including sometimes stakeholders with conflicting interests. Of course, the word conflict will be music to Richard's ears. I don't know if he's still there. But in the event of a maritime accident, there has traditionally been pressure to target the sitting duck, the hapless seafarer. Thank you, panelists, all of you who obviously walk the shipping talk. The IMarEST is committed to sharing knowledge and disseminating information to the marine fraternity free of charge via technical discussions such as this webinar. I certainly hope all of you in the audience, especially those of you who got a chance to share your views, found today's discussion valuable. Whether the outcome of our discussions reach the appropriate authorities remains to be seen. Yet the IMarEST plays its part in remaining steadfast in its mission to uphold the standards and strive towards quality and fairness. We want to ensure that the dreams and aspirations of that boy are never shattered with the threat of dire consequences as a result of factors beyond his professional control. He should rest assured that he can concentrate on his core responsibilities on board and has the full backing and fairness of the maritime law should an undesirable situation arise. We look forward to your participation at the next IMarEST event. And as they say back home in Panama, saludos.
Mr. Sarir, Director General Rafael Cigarruista send me a WhatsApp now to tell you hello and all the panelists.
Will do. Thank you. And we've got this recorded on YouTube Live. We'll send you the link as well. Thank you for your input. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Stay
What a
safe.
pleasure. Thank you, Vikas, Nikhil.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.